Okay, we're going to have a wee look at a short walk cycle tutorial, and we're going to look at trying to combine some of the things that we've learned already using motion tween and also using frame by frame animation. So let me just play this animation for you to begin with. So if I go to Control, Test Movie, and Flash, you'll see this walk cycle of this character. And we're starting to build up our scene, we're starting to build up our layers a wee bit here, okay? So let me go ahead and I'm just going to create this from scratch again, just so that I can show you exactly how I've gone about doing it. So I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to keep the dimensions the same again, just nice size for the tutorials. Okay, so we're going to start off by creating a sky layer, and I'm just going to quickly talk you through this. Okay, so I'm just going to select a colour at the moment. In fact, I'm going to go with a radial gradient, and I'm going to turn off an outline. I'm just going to make sure that my sky fits the canvas, and when I select that, I can go up here to colour and edit the gradient. Okay, now I can use my gradient transform tool here, which is going to allow me to concentrate the gradient if I wish, or dilute it by pulling it out. Bring it back down again. I'm going to lock that layer and repeat the same thing again with the ground, or this, we'll call it grass, we'll make it nice and green. So I'm going to get my rectangle, and I'm just going to go back again to this so that I can see it. Create my rectangle over the length of my workspace. Select this point and choose a kind of slightly darker shade of green, and select this point and choose a kind of lighter green. Back to my gradient transform tool. I'm just going to squash this down, rotate it. And what I'm going to do using my selection tool now is just hover over this line and just give it a wee curve. Remember, you can edit points where lines meet and also in between points. So I have my wee curve here. So I'm now going to lock that layer and generate my new layer, and this is going to be my wee dude. Okay, this is going to be the walk cycle that I'm going to generate. But what I need is the images for this character to begin with. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and Import to Library, and I've already prepared these images, so I'm just going to grab them off the desktop. So I've gone into my library, or my folder rather, where I have these images saved, and these images have already been individually edited within Photoshop. So each of them are the exact same size in terms of the dimensions, and they're all PNGs, so they have the transparency around the images. So I'm going to import them into my library, and if I go to my libraries window, tab over here, you'll see the images. Remember, if you can't find any of these, then you'll find them under window, or you can simply reset your workspace, and if you're working with something classic, more than likely you're going to find it laid out the same way that I have it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my character on to the screen, and I'm just going to pop him here around about the centre. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at converting this character or this image here into a movie clip, which is slightly similar in the sense, or in the process of creating graphics like we have done in earlier tutorials. But I'll show you the difference here. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this object and convert to symbol. Instead of using a graphic this time, we're going to change it to a movie clip, and I'm going to name it walk cycle. I'm going to keep the registration the same for the object, and I'm going to hit OK. And we'll notice again a light blue box appears and the reorientation or pivot point of our object. So it looks like there's no change, but what we can do now is we can double click, and now we are inside this symbol, inside this movie clip. And we can identify that in two ways. One, the background or any other layers have kind of gone slightly opaque. And second of all, we'll notice this icon up here suggests that we're now inside this walk cycle that we've created. All our layers have disappeared, or look like they've disappeared rather. If I hit this blue arrow, that will take us back outside, but we're now going in again, so down a level, and we're now working inside the movie clip itself. So we're going to name this walk cycle, so we know that this is the movie clip or the layer that we're working with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring in all the other frames for my wee dude and my character to allow him to be able to walk. So in order to do that, I'm going to right click and convert to a blank keyframe, which is going to give me a blank space. It's just waiting for information to be put in, similar to when you generate a new layer. So that's all I've done. And I'm going to go back to using these onion skin. Now it's a wee bit hard to see the green there, so what I'll do is I'll change the colour here to maybe something a wee bit more, I'll just use black actually. That should be a bit easier for you to be able to see. Okay, now I could use my onion skin. As I said to you before, I deliberately prepared these images so that the rectangles around the image here were the exact same size, which would make things a hell of a lot easier for me when it comes to trying to match them up. So that way I can just use my arrow keys, make sure they're in position, and then repeat the process. Now I could continue just to convert to blank keyframes and go all the way along. Now on the third frame, so I'm just going to bring that in. What I could do here at this point is I know that I've got 8 frames in total to form a walk cycle. So I'm going to just select along to the 8th frame here, right click and convert to blank keyframes, and that gives me all my blank keyframes, so I can quickly and easily now just drag in. And I'm trying to get this as close to that crosshair as possible, because I know if I move the orientation point in the centre of the shape, then I'm more likely to get it bang on a bit quicker, and then just use the arrow keys on the keyboard just to get the position correct. Now obviously what I could do is use my properties like we looked at before to gain a knowledge of the exact positioning X, Y and Z, X, Y coordinates for the position of the image, and we can just keep on repeating them, but it's just as easy to do it by eye. And when it comes to working in Flash, particularly when you're doing frame by frame animation, and to be a good animator, it's important that you can use your eye to be able to do these things. Okay, so I've now created frame by frame movement of my character and walk cycle, which has taken 8 frames in total. I'm going to turn off the onion skin, and we're going to come back out again. Now, when you're working with movie clips in Flash, if I go to play the timeline, there's 2 questions we might ask ourselves here. One, well, there's only 1 frame, so surely the animation is just going to stop. But because the movie clip continues to loop itself over and over and over again, basically until you tell it to stop or it's no longer visible on the timeline. If we go to Control and Test Movie, we should be able to see this animation playing. And you'll notice that the character is walking really fast. Now that's deliberate at this stage. This is something that we're going to look at editing and changing. If I come back here and try and test the animation, you'll notice it's just plain and stop, it doesn't loop. And that's generally because your movie clips will not play like this within Flash. They have to be rendered out or tested, whether it's testing the scene or testing the movie. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive back inside this guy, right? And we're working at 24 frames per second, which means at 24 frames this is 1 second of animation. So effectively what we've generated is 1/3 of a second. So each frame here really is running at 1/3 of the speed of what is being displayed at 1/3 of the time of what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the 8th to the 2nd frame and move this block along 2 spaces, which now gives this first frame, first image rather, 3 frames in total on the timeline. Now I'm going to go to the 3rd, and I can hold down Shift and select the 8th and move the block along again and continue to do the same thing. Which is now going to slow down the animation to the speed that I'm looking for. Okay, and for this last frame, all I'm going to do is right click and insert frame. So we now have 3 each individual pose here as 3 frames displayed on the timeline. So let's go back out and we'll test that again now. So that's looking a lot smoother. Now for the purpose of this animation, what we're going to do is we're going to stretch out the sky, the grass and this wee dude to last over 5 seconds. Okay, so we'll go to frame 120 and I'm just going to insert a frame for the sky, insert a frame for the grass, and I'm going to insert a frame for the movie clip for the wee dude. Okay, now let's test the animation here. So as I was saying to you, it's playing the animation, it's showing us the grass, it's showing us the sky, they're static images. Okay, but the movie clip isn't playing for the character. However, it is displayed on the screen for this length of time. So when I control and test the movie, you'll see that the movie clip is now playing. So that's the only thing about movie clips. If you won't see them playing within Flash like this, you'll need to render them out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a wee look at generating now using our motion tween knowledge some clouds, and I'm going to look at just picking a couple of clouds using the ovals tool and colour white. So I'm going to start that again. So I'm just going to make a couple of fun fluffy clouds. I'm going to repeat them along. Now you'll notice that what I've done is I've actually moved outside the viewing workspace for our animation, which is absolutely fine. And the reason being that this, if you can imagine the workspace that we have, is almost like a window that we're viewing this animation. And outside here, these objects can pass through and they will be cut off. So if I go to Control Test Movie at the moment, you'll notice that all we can see are the clouds that are displayed in this screen. And what we're going to look at doing is we're going to look at selecting all of these clouds. And at the moment they're just these bitmap kind of rasterized images. We can see that the separate kind of dots and pixels that are making up this image. What we want to do is combine these together and convert them into a graphic so that we can start tweening it. I'm going to right click on this, convert to symbol. I'm going to call it clouds, and I'm going to make sure that I've set it to being a graphic. And I'm going to select OK. And we'll notice that they're now all grouped together. Okay, you can see this blue outline around, and we're now ready to start tweening them. Okay, so say for example I wanted to edit this, right, and I wanted to maybe change the colour of them. If I double click, I've now gone inside the graphic, similar to what we did with the movie clip. This would allow me to perhaps maybe drop the opacity of the clouds, so you can see that they're a wee bit hazier. If I come back out again, you'll notice that. Okay, or if I go back inside again, I might want to select this cloud, edit, copy, edit, paste in place. I'm just going to grab it and move over here to increase the overall length. Come back out again, and you'll notice that that's updated that graphic for me. So without further ado, let's look at tweening this. Okay, so I'm going to copy this frame and I'm going to select and paste it at the end. So I now have a start point and an end point, and I'm going to create a classic tween. There is no movement at the moment because I've not determined the movement. I'm going to select this last frame and I'm going to go to my properties here, and moving along the x-axis, just move it ever so slightly. Now let's go and first of all grab my scrubber so we can see that that's actually moved. Now let's have a look at it in the movie. Okay, so it's running at not too bad a pace. I'm going to lock the layer. Last thing I did was generated a new layer, and I created some hills. And to do that I used my pen tool, and I just put a fill colour in place. Now I'll just change my alpha back up again. So I'm going to click and then hold and drag for my pen tool, and I'm just going to create a couple of wee hill shapes. Nothing too fancy, just a couple of curves. And you'll notice again I'm going outside of the workspace. I'm just going to close this up very quickly for the purposes of the tutorial. Deselect that, I can use my paint bucket tool and I can fill it. I'm going to get rid of this outline again, so a quick and easy way of doing that is by selecting the full frame here and all the information, holding in Shift to select the fill and deleting the outside. Okay. Remember that you can curve these and change them about slightly, or use the selection tool where you can use your Bezier handles and or move the actual anchor points themselves of the line. Okay. Now we'll notice that my wee dude's hidden behind these hills, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the hill layer down behind the grass so that we can now actually see it. And I could go back up to my colour here, I could change this to linear gradient, and we'll have it something similar to my hills. I'm just going to use my gradient transform tool here to flip this round. And again I can move the position and effect that it's having. Okay, something like that. So what we're going to do is select these hills and repeat the process of creating the graphic. So we'll call this hills, OK that. We're going to copy this initial frame and we're going to select and paste it at the end and create a classic tween. Now it's again a case of just moving hills and try something like that, see how that looks. Now because the hills are closer to our character, they're going to be moving faster than the clouds. Okay, and this is again where your kind of speed equals distance over time comes into play. We are choosing the start point and the end point. We are working out and deciding the distance. We have already decided the time, so we are now affecting the speed. That is the variable. And that, in this case, is getting done a lot by eye. So let's go to test the movie and we'll have a wee look at it. Okay, so that might be moving a wee bit fast, which means what we can do is we can just go back here and we'll just pull that back ever so slightly and test the movie again. And straight away that seems a wee bit more realistic. Now you can keep on adding to this animation, building in more layers, putting in a sun, perhaps in mountains. Maybe put some items in the foreground, which is going to force you to speed them up a wee bit because they are closer to us. But one last thing I'm going to show you, similarly to motion tweening with our graphics, the wee dude character, this wee layer that we have here, if I wanted to animate this character actually walking from left to right, I can do so. I'm going to copy the initial frame and paste it at the end and create a classic tween. Now, I'm going to just grab the position of the character and move him along outside the screen, and then I'm going to go to here and I'm going to grab him and move him along outside the screen on this side. So when I test the movie, what's going to happen is, obviously that's walking extremely fast, but that's just because we have tweened him going from left to right out the side. But you'll notice that this movie clip is still playing even though we've tweened him going from left to right. Okay, so there's a couple of wee things that maybe you could play about with and try them yourself.